In the fall of last year, I had a literature professor who he gave us like a really informative packet about what he wanted to see in our papers. This was everything from he didn't like Times New Roman, so he told us to write in Garamond or something else that's aesthetically pleasing. I thought that was pretty hilarious. But then also like going step by step, like this is what I want your first paragraph to look like. He wanted two introduction paragraphs, and so he explained, like the first paragraph is like opening up the dossier, and the second one is kind of like a roadmap to where you're going to go, and this is kind of like how I want to see this. But he was very clear about his expectations, which is key because it's very hard to know what you're supposed to strive for each professor. So if the professor can set the ground rules at the very beginning and tell you exactly what they're looking for, it allows you to actually work towards that when you get assigned a paper. And then the other thing was that he was accessible. I would send him a rough draft. He would take him about up to a week before the paper was due, and then give really good feedback about, okay, this is what I like about your paper. I could really see you going in like this direction or that direction, doing something like that. This idea, maybe, it's going a little bit off topic or might not be necessary to proving your point or whatever. But, so giving like really clear instructions, really good feedback so that, you give the student a chance to actually work towards putting forth their best work. The second thing that was memorable was I had a stats professor who kept reminding us that the skills that we were learning in class were something that we could use in the workforce, which is something that it can be easy to forget sometimes when we're in the thick of things and going as like thinking about academics and all that stuff. But like we are learning transferable skills, and I feel like being reminded of that in class made the material feel all the more valuable. This is not something that is just really interesting and mind expanding on this level, but it's also something I can take somewhere else. And so to be reminded of that and be shown that, I felt was quite memorable.
The most impressive experience that I've had to do with a writing class I was in which we had to write long essays pulling in multiple sources. And of course, not only did he go through the essay and create comments on the side in a Word document, noting here you could expand your theme or whatever it was, he recorded a 10 to 15 minute audio recording and sent that out to the students. And I could take his recording and compare that side by side with the notes that he had as well. And it was just such clarity. It was almost as if he was sitting there next to me by my side, guiding me through this learning process and helping me to understand and grow. And then, of course, he made himself accessible with office hours and everything, but it was completely, for me, it was a new and totally different way to engage with somebody, and it showed how much he was invested in my ability to learn what he was trying to teach us. So I was very, very impressed with that.
I have two experiences to share. The first involves the graduate student colloquia in my department. I know graduate student colloquia exist elsewhere, but at risk of over-explaining, these are advised by one or more faculty members in the department, but are run by the graduate students and are opportunities for students and faculty to meet to workshop drafts of dissertation chapters or articles, or to read existing work in the field, to invite in guest speakers, etc. And I've both been a member of and a co-coordinator of a couple of the colloquia, different subfields in my program, and have found that to be a really rewarding experience, particularly because of the kind of collaborations that it makes possible between students and faculty. And one particular experience I have in mind was getting the opportunity with a couple of other students in my program to participate in a roundtable with a visiting professor from Johns Hopkins. And that involved reading and responding to a draft of a book chapter that he was putting together with pieces of our own work that we sort of saw productively in conversation with this faculty member's scholarship. And that was, I think, a really rewarding learning experience, and a very empowering one for students, as well as an enriching one, I think, for the faculty member in question. And then the second memorable experience was one that I had through the Institute for Research on Women, Gender, and Sexuality here at Columbia. one of the offerings of the Institute is a course on feminist pedagogy that graduate students can take, the main sort of thrust of which involves enabling students to design syllabi of their own creation that intersect in some way with the subject matter and mission of the Institute. Which was exciting for me because teaching is important to me, and there aren't a ton of opportunities, at least in GSAS here, for students, graduate students, to design and teach their own classes. So this, I think, is a really huge opportunity for students for whom that's important. But it also allowed me to learn a great deal through the process of putting together the syllabus, not only about syllabus design, but about the course subject matter that I had envisioned. And I also found myself translating the kinds of conversations that we were having about syllabus design in that class into my own teaching of undergraduates in the university writing classes here at Columbia, and found that having conversations about syllabus design and actually involving my students in the process of designing a syllabus or thinking about course design at various points in the semester felt, I think, very enriching for everybody on both sides.
I have one really memorable experience, which was from last spring semester in a class, Colonization, Decolonization, which is one of the requirements within the CSER department, Center of Studies of Ethnicity and Race. And I had the first day when we went around, it was a small seminar course, maybe 30 students. And I had the professor, first thing he kind of said, we went around, did pronouns, which I had done in other courses, which I really liked. But this was the first time where the professor also did his pronouns, but also kind of gave a lot of his identities that would, he's a white male teaching colonization, decolonization, which he also kind of expanded on how that might not be as, his perspective was different than obviously a lot of the other students in the room, mainly persons of color and a lot of women. So for him to address that, for me, was really powerful. It made me feel a lot more comfortable sharing my experiences without feeling as though he was, maybe secretly judging me, or he was bringing stuff to the table that, again, due to his perspectives, might have been a bit slighted, which I think, it happens in every course where they do pronouns. But for me, that was really impactful for the professor to kind of expand on that.
So at the beginning of the semester, my professor, who's teaching a design class, immediately told us that he's not available by email or by appointments. The only way to reach him is through the class and then whatever hours he sets up to be in the lab. So that was sort of discouraging, to say at the beginning, because the class was basically just a project. So it was just one big design project that we work on through the semester. And then through the class, we're just being taught design methods and design principles. What was very memorable about it is whenever he was available, he was completely available to us. He cut off everything else. And then he was always available even when we didn't have anything to do. So a lot of times when we were done with our design and he still had like an hour left, he would ask students if they want to go for a drink, which is a bit unconventional, but made him a lot more tangible to us. A lot of times we had one-to-one time with him, which it didn't have to be about our project. So if we are running an idea with him, he would let us go with this idea, even if it's outside the project, and give us feedback on these ideas, which for me as a graduate student, it sort of made me think about what I want to do after. And that made me give him so many different questions, like, okay, you might have run with someone with similar ideas as mine. What would that do? So that sort of not accessible to me all the time made me show up with questions. And that was actually very powerful for me.